2024, Officer Kenny Bennett of the Pryor Creek Police Department, who was later joined by Officer Jessica Flood, responded to a call regarding Andrew Martin, who was sleeping in his vehicle in a private parking lot in Pryor Creek, Oklahoma. The encounter that followed was captured on Officer Bennett's body camera.
Okay, sorry, you might start master this way. This guy doesn't look like he's alert. He has some kind of liquid coming out of his mouth all run down his shirt. How you doing? Not bad. You okay? Not bad. So, what's going on? You sitting in your truck? Okay. You got anything to drink today? No? You want any kind of medication or anything? Where are you coming from? Okay, what are you doing here? What are you doing at Pryor? What brings you here? Where are you headed? North? Okay. You know anybody in Pryor, or you just happen to? Well, I mean, you're kind of pulled off here in this parking lot a little bit weird. You're a little bit in the roadway. So somebody called in on you. Is there a crime? I mean, yeah, standing in the roadway. That's what the technical term is for it. Right? That's a medical. It's awake now. So I get here, and I mean, you're drooling all over yourself. I started medical. I knocked on your window a couple of times. Look at your shirt. Whenever I got here, you were actively drooling on yourself. And I knocked on the window. I got no response. So I knocked again. You're partially obstructing the roadway. You're pulled off here on private property. You have no business being here, so that's loitering. Somebody called me. I don't know who called me. Dispatch is the one who called me. Somebody called dispatch. It's private property, and you have no business here. Well, I've asked you, and you haven't told me, so... Well, I'm investigating a possible crime. So if you're intoxicated, passed out behind the wheel, if you've taken something... Yeah.
Officer Bennett argues that Mr. Martin's vehicle is quote-unquote partially obstructing the roadway, and that he is quote-unquote loitering by being parked on private property. Section 11-1001 of Title 47 of the Oklahoma statutes states that, quote, upon any highway outside of a business or residence district, no person shall stop, park, or leave standing any vehicle, whether attended or unattended, upon the paved or main traveled part of the highway when it is practicable to stop, park, or so leave such vehicle off such part of said highway. The state statute is limited to highways outside of business and residential districts, and because Mr. Martin parked in an apartment building parking lot, it is likely that he was in a residential district. However, Section 6-7-17 of the City Code of Pryor Creek extends this prohibition to any street within the city, stating that, quote, upon any street, no person shall stop, park, or leave standing any vehicle, whether attended or unattended, upon the paved or main traveled part of the street when it is practical to stop, park, or leave the vehicle off such parts of the street. Now, although the city ordinance would apply to the street that Mr. Martin was parked beside, it clearly limits the prohibition to parking upon the paved or main traveled part of the street, and a court would almost certainly find that any minor encroachment by Mr. Martin's truck into the easement on the side of the road did not violate this ordinance. As for any potential so-called loitering violation, neither Oklahoma's criminal code nor the City Code of Pryor Creek contains a general loitering prohibition. Section 1787 of Title 21 of the Oklahoma statutes prohibits loitering in or upon an automobile or motor vehicle without the consent of the owner. But this would obviously not apply to Mr. Martin, as he was in his own vehicle. No other Oklahoma statutes pertain directly to loitering. So, given the limitations on any potentially applicable loitering statutes, it is highly unlikely that a court would conclude that Mr. Martin was engaged in loitering.
Which is okay. I don't have a problem with that. If you're just taking a... If you want to play the... Why don't you go ahead and step out of the vehicle for me? Yes, sir. Appreciate it. If you want to, it's up to you. You want to leave the door open or you want to shut it? No, it's up to you again. I don't care. You have identification on you?
No.
You do not. So what is your name and date of birth?
Andrew, A-N-D-R-U, Martin. So this is the road here?
Yeah, I mean,
Or is this the road?
so the city maintains the roadway all the way to here, and then they have an easement over here, and then that's private property. So you're on private property. You have private property that you have no business being on, and then you're partially in the roadway.
Where's the easement begin?
Say it again.
The easement begin?
The easement begin?
Yeah.
I don't know where the easement
road
begins.
or ends?
I know where the road begins and ends.
So
I don't know where the
begin?
easement begins and
Where's
ends.
the road begin and end?
So, do you have a driver's license in any state?
Oh, yeah.
What state do you have your driver's license in?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma?
Do you know where the road begins and ends? I
It's a
mean,
really weird question.
it's a weird question. Not when I'm being ticketed for parking.
You haven't been ticketed for anything. I've tried to ask you a matter of simple questions so I can conduct my investigation. All you want to do is be difficult.
I don't want to be difficult.
I mean-
you're being difficult. I was minding my own business and you're bothering me. I don't know how that's me being difficult.
We wouldn't have showed up here if we didn't have a call here. So on you,
Oh, that's first of all, that's not true.
100%
I
it
can,
is.
so I can call on you, and that doesn't mean that someone's going to come and investigate you.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It's exactly how this works.
No, I can investigate it because he
Okay.
told me that.
You're good. You, whatever you need to do.
Yeah, I'll be right back. All right, Mr. Martin. So, the condition that you were in when I got here, like I said, you were pulled off the road here asleep. Looks like, do you live at... You don't live there anymore? It's the address that shows on your driver's license.
Where do you live?
Nearby,
Nearby,
The address.
the relevant person.
It is. That's. I'm literally asking you because you're sleeping in your truck right here, and I don't know that you're going to be safe to drive anywhere. So yeah, it's absolutely.
How would I not be safe? So am I safe to
Where-
drive
what's
to
your
Meadow
address?
Trace, or am I
What's your
safe to
address?
drive to Portland or?
What's your address?
I don't know what that has anything.
It's going to be like this the whole time.
yeah.
So you can continue to obstruct our
So
investigation.
here's the thing. I can leave you and let you...
comply with your investigation.
You're not required to comply with our investigation?
No, I don't have to assist you.
I mean, you have to answer our questions if we're conducting an investigation.
That's
Otherwise,
exactly-
otherwise you're obstructing our investigation.
Really? Is that how the Fifth Amendment works?
Mhm, yeah.
Fourth Amendment? First Amendment?
Do you know your
Is that how
amendments?
it works? I don't think you do.
Okay, so I can put you through a couple of standard field sobriety tests and see if you're good to drive. And if you are, then we'll get out of here and we'll let you drive. Okay? And we won't ask you any more
For
questions.
sitting in a vehicle in private property.
Somebody calling in because they were concerned about you because you were partially on the roadway.
We're a lot closer to harassment on your part than we are.
We can go to the jail and we can do this in front of a
I mean,
judge,
yeah, I'm not-
and
Sure,
we can
could.
have
I
that
probably
conversation
should.
there.
I mean,
If that's what you want to do.
That's
I
absolutely
don't
fine.
want to do that. If I wanted to do that, I would have driven to the
I don't want to do that either. If I wanted to do that.
driven to a parking space bigger than that. See the difference there?
There actually is a law against sleeping in public.
Really?
Yeah, it's
So
the
am I
city
in public
ordinance.
or am I on private
If
property?
you're at the park, like you just said,
I didn't say the park.
maybe.
I said a parking space.
Public
I'm not
public
on
access.
public
So,
property.
do you live in these apartments?
Do you?
Do you live in these apartments?
Do you?
No, I don't live in these apartments. Do you? I answered your question. You going to answer mine?
You're giving me a ticket for being in the road.
Have I given you a ticket yet?
Investigating the home, because you can't for being in the roadway.
I can't?
That's what you told me. Well, I mean, you could, but
I give you a ticket for. I could pick for being in the roadway or loitering because you're on private property that you claim to have no business being
well,
at.
I'm sure that I could go in front of a judge and argue the case and be put fairly successful rather quickly and easily by.
And that's fine. If you want to go and argue your case in court, if you want to go argue your case in court, that's fine. But I'm not going to argue it with you here on the side of the road.
Right.
Okay? So you
You're
can.
going to give me a ticket for being unsafe when I told you exactly what I did, which was.
He's going to conduct a couple of
Name
tests,
safety,
field sobriety
right?
tests. Are you willing to
Are you
comply with
willing?
those
Are you
tests?
willing to comply with some field sobriety tests?
Well, what are my options then? To go to jail or
Are
do
you
what you tell me
willing to comply with the
Threatening me
field sobriety test?
with
That's the
incarceration?
question.
Threatening you at all?
Nobody threatened you. Nobody
I'm
said
here to do
anything
my
other-
job.
So I don't have to. Am I free to go?
No,
No, you're not free to go. We're still conducting our investigation. If you allow me to finish conducting my investigation, and you will.
So here's what I don't understand. I'm not refusing.
Okay.
Okay.
So you'll agree to take the state staff?
What I don't understand is what indication that I'm intoxicated I've given.
The officers repeatedly asked Mr. Martin if he will quote-unquote comply with standardized field sobriety tests, or SFSTs. SFSTs are roadside assessments used by law enforcement officers to gauge a driver's level of impairment, typically involving balance, coordination, and cognitive tasks, such as the walk and turn, one-leg stand, and horizontal gaze nystagmus tests. These tests are thought to help officers decide whether probable cause exists to arrest a driver on suspicion of driving under the influence. However, the use of SFSTs is controversial, with critics arguing that the tests are unreasonably subjective, as they rely heavily on an officer's individual judgment, which can lead to inconsistent or biased interpretations of a driver's performance. Other opponents question the scientific basis for relying on SFSTs to produce evidence of impairment. For instance, researcher Stephen Rubenzer concluded in his 2008 publication, The Standardized Field Sobriety Test, a review of scientific and legal issues, that, quote, the SFSTs are not validated as tests of impaired driving or as indicators of loss of normal physical functioning. The SFSTs cannot be used to estimate BAC in court and lack specificity for alcohol. The limited reliability data suggests that variations in administration or scoring from one police officer to another will be a substantial source of error, regardless whether BAC or behavioral impairment is the criterion. The SFSTs were introduced into widespread use before thorough testing was completed and the results independently replicated. Even more than 20 years later, many basic questions concerning their use have not been answered. The effects of many variables, including medical conditions, fatigue, and fear, have not been examined. Further research is needed to justify their widespread use and to establish whether, in light of the current legal environment, the current SFST battery is the best available or good enough for distinguishing those who are impaired from those who are not. Regardless of the controversy, courts currently recognize FSTs as valid, and officers regularly use them to gather additional evidence of impairment when investigating a potential DUI offense. However, Oklahoma law does not require citizens to submit to FSTs if they are suspected of DUI, and they retain the right to refuse to participate. Well, given that FSTs are voluntary and not required by law, a driver's refusal to perform these tests cannot be characterized as quote-unquote willfully obstructing an officer in the performance of a duty in violation of Oklahoma's obstruction statute. Accordingly, while the officers were free to request that Mr. Martin participate in SFSTs, they would not be in their lawful authority to arrest him solely for refusing to quote-unquote comply with testing.
At any point in this, other than I drove this, is that against the law?
It's uncommon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for somebody
Okay,
to be asleep behind the wheel of their vehicle,
How many police
not
officers are asleep?
legally parked in a parking space on
You go
private property.
investigate
Will you comply with the field sobriety test or not?
them? Or what? Oh, I
Yes
remember
or
you,
no?
Flood.
Yes,
I
yes or
remember
no?
you. Do you remember me? Don't you?
No. Yes or
I bet
no?
You do. Okay. Now I feel like this is harassment. Is there a supervisor available?
That's
He
me.
is the
I'm the
supervisor.
Where's your supervisor?
He is the supervisor
I am the
of
We
the
had
shift.
this same conversation. Was that you? Were you there?
I don't believe so. I don't believe I've ever met you
I
before.
don't even know where I would have met you. It's yes or no? Yes or no?
See,
Yes or no?
You didn't understand what private property was when you were in the apartment complex. You thought that was public property. Do you remember that now?
You live in
I
this
say we
apartment complex?
No, he doesn't. I'm familiar. So I think we should just go to Mace County Jail.
I'm going to go to the county jail for.
Obstruction at this point.
All you want to do is sit and argue.
I'm not arguing.
He
I'm
was
asking-
intoxicated then.
No, I wasn't.
And that's what I feel like he's intoxicated now, otherwise he wouldn't be passed out behind the wheel of his
I
vehicle.
wasn't passed out. I was asleep. That's why I woke up with a knock. I told you I drove to this parking space to do that. I'd like to speak to a supervisor.
He is
You
the
are speaking to a
I'd like to
supervisor.
speak to your supervisor.
They're all out right now.
That's weird. That happens every time I want to speak to a supervisor.
There's one
You asked
supervisor
for my
assigned.
supervisor and he's right here.
There's one supervisor. There's one
You
supervisor
don't
assigned
just
per
keep
shift. Okay, that's me.
Okay. So then, if
At
you're
6
the
o'clock
one-
this
if you're
afternoon,
the
there will
one
be a
that's-
different
if you're the one
supervisor
that's
here.
violating people's laws, then we're resolved.
I mean,
That's a
you don't.
conversation you can have with the judge.
You don't have a
if you-
constitutional right to speak to a supervisor anyway. I'm trying to work with you here.
We've
okay?
tried. We've tried to ask you. You don't have a ticket in your hand.
Okay, so am I free to
You
go?
no. You've been
you're
asked if
threatening
you will
me with
comply.
arrest for sitting in a car, taking a nap. When I told you I'm taking a nap because I'm too tired to drive. I had a little bit further to go, and I was tired, so I'm going to nap.
And you won't even tell me how far that is to go.
What does it say in the driver's manual to do when you become too tired to drive? You say you should keep on going? Go over somewhere safe to sleep?
Somewhere safe to sleep. I mean, I don't think that that's.
Where is somewhere safe?
I mean, legally parked, we could argue that, even though this isn't.
Legally.
We've gone over this and over this and over this. You're not even in a parking spot at all.
I'm not in
You're
the
not
road.
in a parking spot. We got called here because of you specifically, and this truck specifically.
I'm not in the road.
You are in the easement. Look, if you look at that sign right there,
Park in the easement. The easement
and
goes all the way to
sign,
the center line.
it's still
of the
city
location.
property.
I'm
Go
done.
ahead,
Turn around.
Yes, turn around.
Dude.
Turn around. We're done. We tried.
You tried what?
Officer Bennett claims that Mr. Martin is quote-unquote obstructing the officer's investigation by not answering their questions. Oklahoma law defines obstruction broadly. According to Section 540 of Title 21 of the Oklahoma statutes, quote, any person who willfully delays or obstructs any public officer in the discharge or attempt to discharge any duty of his or her office is guilty of a misdemeanor. Courts have found that this statute can cover both physical and non-physical interference with an officer's duties. However, citizens are generally not required to assist officers in their investigations, even when they have been lawfully detained. As the Supreme Court explained in the 1984 case of Berkemer versus McCarty, during a Terry stop, quote, the officer may ask the detainee a moderate number of questions to determine his identity and to try to obtain information confirming or dispelling the officer's suspicions. But the detainee is not obliged to respond, and unless the detainee's answers provide the officer with probable cause to arrest him, he must then be released. Now, there may be an exception to this general rule when a citizen has a legal obligation to provide answers to the officer's question. For instance, in the 2004 case of Heibel versus 6th Judicial District Court of Nevada, the Supreme Court held that it did not violate the Fourth Amendment for a state to require a suspect to disclose his name in the course of a Terry stop. In reaching this conclusion, the court discussed the language in the Berkemer case, determining that the passage merely recognized that the Fourth Amendment itself did not require citizens to answer questions, but states were still permitted to create an independent legal obligation that detainees identify themselves, such as a stop and identify statute. Similarly, in the 2011 case of Koch versus City of Del City, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Oklahoma, concluded that an officer was entitled to qualified immunity for arresting a citizen under Oklahoma's obstruction statute for refusing to answer his questions during investigative detention, holding that there was no clearly established precedent recognizing a right to refuse to respond to an officer's questions during a Terry stop. However, the court specifically limited its conclusion to the facts of the case, which were unique because the suspect was under a judicial order requiring the defendant to answer the exact kind of questions that she refused to answer during the Terry stop. As the 10th Circuit later explained when discussing the Koch case and the 2012 case of Kaufman versus Higgs, quote, we held that it was not unreasonable for the officer to think that Ms. Koch had a legal obligation, arising from the judicial order, to reveal the information he requested, despite Ms. Koch's countervailing Fifth Amendment rights. The court then concluded that officers did not have arguable probable cause to arrest an individual for refusing to answer a question when they had no legal duty under a statute, subpoena, or judicial order to aid the police in their investigation, determining that it was not reasonable for the officers to believe that the suspect was legally obligated to reveal potentially incriminating information. Accordingly, because Mr. Martin had no apparent legal duty to answer the officer's questions, it is unlikely that a court would conclude that his refusal to answer them constituted obstruction, even if a court found that he was lawfully detained. And if a court were to determine that the officers did not have legal grounds to conduct a Terry stop, which seems more probable, then it is even more likely that an obstruction charge would fail, because, as the 10th Circuit explained in the Kaufman case, the law is well established that a citizen has no obligation to answer an officer's questions during a consensual encounter, which is what the interaction would be considered if the court found the detention to be unlawful.
Tried
To reason with you and you're unreasonable.
reason with me.
It's hard to reason with somebody who's intoxicated anyway, so that makes sense.
No indication of being intoxicated.
Well, we tried to give you the opportunity to show us that you're not intoxicated, and you just want to sit here and argue with us. Like I said, I'm not going to argue with you on the side of the road. We'll just...
You're making zero sense.
But I'm not. You can't tell me where the road begins and ends. But I'm not making
Is that what
sense.
we're back to? We're doing circles?
That's what you pulled me out of.
If you give anything illegal on anything's going to poke, stick, or stab me, anything's going to be illegal, if you consider contraband if you take it into a jail facility.
Kidding me, dude? In the middle of moving.
All right, come on.
Whoa, yeah.
Yeah.
Upstairs now.
Have a seat right here. Be careful. Don't hit your knee on the computer mount. It hurts pretty bad. I don't disagree with you.
What's the charge?
Obstruction.
Obstruction of what?
Obstructing me in the performance of my duties.
What duty?
I'm trying to perform an investigation here, and you won't answer any of my questions.
I answered every question you asked me.
Okay.
What question did I answer?
You didn't answer any of my questions. You just asked more questions and
No,
why I needed to know, and I tried to explain it to you.
all of your questions.
So we'll argue about it in court. That's fine.
Tow it and I'll inventory it. Ask somebody here if it's free to stay. I mean, it's partially in the
It's partially in the, yeah, so, yeah.
I'll have Constantine meet you over there.
Okay.
This is cool. Business owner in this town. Member of the Chamber of Commerce. They yeah, because I work myself. You ever had a job?
I'll offer you a blood test. Hang on just a second. You have been arrested and you are requested to submit to a test or tests to determine the presence and or concentration of intoxicants in your body. The test will be a blood test. If a blood test is performed, it will be done by approved medical personnel under Oklahoma law. If you complete the state's test, you may have an additional test at your own expense. You are not entitled to consult with an attorney prior to making your decision to submit to the state's test. You may refuse the state's test, but as a consequence, your driving privileges will be revoked or denied. If you are 21 years of age or older and the test is .08 or more alcohol concentration, your driving privileges will be revoked or denied. Will you take the state's test? It's going to be a blood test.
I don't understand. I can't talk to an attorney.
That's correct. This is the implied consent test
Yeah,
request.
I see what it says, but I don't understand. It's a first of all, I didn't do anything wrong. You know I'm not intoxicated. And
I don't know that you're not intoxicated. You have the option to submit to the state's test. I can read it to you again if you would like for more clarification. It's going to be a blood test.
It doesn't really clarify. I mean, what?
This is the state law, and this is what I'm required to read you.
I understand.
Okay,
I
and you have
understand
the right to say that you will or you will not.
So my driving privileges are revoked if I refuse.
If you refuse. So
until when? I mean, that's what I'm.
I mean,
I'm just not understanding.
until you go through the court, until you go through the court process, and they determine.
This is.
Well, you've been arrested. Okay.
Well, I don't believe.
I don't think that you're. I don't feel that you're drinking alcohol, but I think you're under the influence of something.
Really?
Yeah, I'm
When
thinking
down there slamming heroin. It's halfway between my house and home, or my house and home.
some kind of drugs, pills, something. So.
I'm under the influence of owning a business and working more often than I sleep.
Okay. You want me to read this test again?
No, I'm good. No,
Or you will not take the state's test? Okay. 30 supervisor would log down at this time and says that has refused to take the state's test. All right, go ahead. He's through Oklahoma driver's license. He was just arguing the whole time. He wouldn't tell me anything. Like,
I'm gonna have to take a picture on your camera. Jake, you gotta be signed on for service.
I am signed on.
On your phone.
According to court records, Mr. Martin was ultimately charged with being in actual physical control of a motor vehicle while under the influence. He was not charged with obstruction. However, on March 31st, 2025, the charge was dismissed at the state's request. Overall, the Pryor Creek police officers get an F for demonstrating a fundamental misunderstanding of Oklahoma law, for maintaining a hostile and confrontational attitude throughout the encounter, and for detaining and arresting Mr. Martin without clear legal justification. From the start, the officers' legal foundation for detaining Mr. Martin was weak at best. Officer Bennett's claim that Mr. Martin was quote-unquote obstructing the roadway fell apart under scrutiny, as the vehicle was parked near an apartment complex, not on a highway or main traveled portion of a street where city ordinances might otherwise apply. The assertion that Mr. Martin was quote-unquote loitering also lacked merit, considering that Oklahoma law doesn't prohibit loitering in one's own vehicle, and the local code provides no relevant criminal statutes to support that claim. As the encounter progressed, the officers escalated the situation by invoking Oklahoma's obstruction statute based on Mr. Martin's refusal to answer their questions. However, absent any legal duty imposed by a stop and identify law, subpoena, or court order, citizens are not obligated to respond to investigatory questioning during a Terry stop. Simply refusing to speak, especially when no lawful detention has been established, is not obstruction. The decision to escalate to arrest under these flimsy pretenses was excessive and uncalled for. No reasonable officer trained in basic constitutional law could have believed there was probable cause to arrest him for obstruction. The fact that all charges were eventually dropped doesn't undo the harm caused by the unlawful detention and arrest. If anything, it underscores the absence of any legitimate foundation for the officer's conduct. This interaction is a prime example of how systemic failures in training, accountability, or both can manifest in everyday police interactions. Mr. Martin gets an A- for calmly and firmly asserting his rights, refusing to submit to the officer's unlawful demands, and for maintaining his composure during a needlessly escalated encounter. Under pressure and threat of arrest, Mr. Martin largely kept his cool and refused to cave to the officer's legally baseless demands. He didn't interfere physically, raise his voice, or attempt attempt to flee. His refusal to answer questions or perform field sobriety tests was well within his rights, especially given the absence of any reasonable suspicion or probable cause to support the officer's actions. In fact, his firm refusal to play along likely helped expose the unlawful nature of the detention and the arrest that followed. That said, there were brief moments where Mr. Martin could have done more to clarify the nature of his objections or present a consistent verbal assertion of his rights. His tone occasionally came across as terse, which is understandable under the circumstances, but a more deliberate articulation could have added weight to his side of the encounter. Regardless, Mr. Martin's actions were constitutionally sound, proportionate to the situation, and ultimately vindicated when the charges were dismissed. His conduct offers a solid example of how to handle an unlawful stop while minimizing personal risk and maximizing public transparency. I commend Mr. Martin for remaining calm in the face of a quickly escalating situation and refusing to allow the officer's intimidation tactics to get the better